Berlin, December 31st, 1937, Spartacus Olsen reporting from the German capital. As 1937 ends, the Nazi regime's aggressive drive for rearmament has become a self-fulfilling prophecy. This quarter, as Hjalmar Schacht abandoned his post at the head of the economy, Hitler admitted that his dreams of military autarky were impossible and that the economy had now been driven to a cliff's edge where the only option for economic survival is conquest of new territory and resources. On this New Year's Eve of 1937, we look back at a quarter when the German police state was officially empowered to ignore law and order, and Hitler took the first practical steps to start a new war. By the end of 1937, the world is drifting further from the fragile peace of the post-war era. In Asia, Japan captured Nanjing in December, unleashing atrocities that shocked international observers, while the attack on the American gunboat Panay highlighted the risk of a wider conflict. In Spain, the civil war intensified with the opening of the Battle of Teruel. Meanwhile, Roosevelt warned of a growing international aggression. The Soviet Great Terror continued, Brazil slid into dictatorship under Vargas Estado Novo, and Italy formally moved away from the League of Nations. Across much of the world, democracy and collective security are retreating as war and authoritarianism advance. In Germany, this development is long concluded, and the final quarter of 1937 was defined by a rapid acceleration towards internal control and external aggression. Throughout October and November, the state's cultural repression and ideological purification campaigns continued unabated as the suppression of so-called degenerate art proceeded, and the regime disciplined the population through propaganda and fear. On November 5th, war planning became explicit at the top when Hitler summoned his military and foreign policy chiefs for a secret meeting, laying out his timeline for acquiring living space in Europe by force. Diplomatically, the regime tightened its international fascist alignment when Italy officially joined the Anti-Comintern Pact on November 6th, cementing an axis against the Soviet Union and communism as a whole. 2 days later, on November 8th, the vitriolic anti-Semitic propaganda exhibition De Ewige Jude, the Eternal Jew, opened in Munich. The infrastructure of the terror state was significantly upgraded on November 13th when Heinrich Himmler consolidated regional SS and police command by creating the office of the higher SS and police leaders. In the realm of foreign affairs, Lord Halifax met with Hitler at Berchtesgaden on November 19th, signaling to the Nazi leadership that Britain might tolerate German expansion in Central Europe if achieved without provoking a general war. The second half of November brought a decisive turning point in domestic policy with the resignation of Economics Minister Hjalmar Schacht, marking the final defeat of economic caution and the triumph of accelerated rearmament. Finally, on December 14th, the regime issued the Preventive Crime Fighting decree, drastically expanding police detention powers by authorizing the internment of asocials without trial. This was part of a general consolidation of the police state as the SS and the regular police forces became inextricably fused. After Heinrich Himmler created the position of higher SS and police leaders, HSSPF, on November 13th, he proceeded immediately to install his most trusted deputies in each military district to coordinate all branches of the SS and police. This effectively creates a unified state protection corps operating beyond traditional administrative restraints. It elevates Himmler and his deputy Reinhard Heydrich to immensely powerful positions. Heydrich now heads both the state security police, Gestapo, the criminal police, and the SS security services, Sicherheitsdienst, or SD, the intelligence agency of the Nazi Party. In this dual capacity, Heydrich controls the division of labor across these organizations, which he had recently formalized in a July 1937 directive. Under his command, the Gestapo holds exclusive executive power to combat specific political enemies such as Marxists and traitors, and handles all individual cases requiring executive police measures. The SD operates as a purely political information and espionage organ tasked with evaluating general and fundamental issues regarding broader ideological opponents, such as the churches, Freemasons, and the Jewish population. Through this extensive portfolio, Heydrich now directs a comprehensive system of surveillance, preventive terror, and ideological persecution. It is no exaggeration to say that he is now in personal charge of the most terrifying parts of the Nazi regime. The SS extrajudicial powers were further extended when, on December 14th, the Ministry of the Interior issued the Decree on Preventive Measures by the Police to Combat Crime. Himmler proceeded to empower Heydrich with the nationwide use of preventive police custody and have his criminal police arbitrarily arrest anyone whose behavior allegedly endangers the public, even if they are not under investigation for any current offense. The targets explicitly include the homeless, beggars, prostitutes, alcoholics, and the work-shy. By categorizing non-conformist behavior as a biological threat to the national community, the decree transforms the police from an organ of law enforcement into an instrument of social and racial hygiene. The expansion of extrajudicial terror immediately began filling the concentration camps with yet more inmates categorized as asocials or professional criminals. In sum, these acts enable the police to actively bypass the justice system and instead use their own arbitrary power to permanently remove those deemed unfit for the German racial community. Acceptance of this lawlessness has long been created by the incessant painting of minorities, especially the Jews, as the source of all things evil and a threat to the very core of German identity. This quarter, these efforts escalated again when the cultural life was aggressively mobilized to foster racial hatred. On November 8th, a massive exhibition, the Ewige Jude, the Eternal Jew, opened in Munich. Drawing over 200,000 visitors by December, including many school classes, the exhibition utilized distorted photographs and fabricated statistics to portray Jews as a biological and cultural plague. It systematically associated Jewish citizens with Bolshevism, greed, and the alleged corruption of German culture. In his opening speech, Goebbels claimed that what visitors would see was so horrific that it can no longer be described in words. The exhibition will now go on to tour German cities, and if Munich is telling, it looks set to achieve a wide audience. As such, this is part of a broader campaign to present the impending geopolitical struggles as a defensive war against international Jewry. To emphasize this, Goebbels' opening speech framed the so-called Jewish question as not only a German problem, but a world problem of the very first rank. Goebbels also continued to praise the ongoing purge of the world of art and again framed it as an antisemitic operation, declaring to the Reich Chamber of Culture in late November that we have removed the Jews and placed again into German hands the leadership and representation of German intellectual life. In combination, the Degenerate Art exhibit and the Eternal Jew exhibition became tools that the press and propaganda apparatus could use to spread the exhibit's message far beyond the already numerous visitors. It is no less than a concerted effort of dehumanization that conditions the public to accept that non-Aryans possess no civilized qualities and are essentially subhuman parasites. In contrast to these hateful lies, one thing has definitely become a parasite leeching on the German economy: rearmament. Our sources inside Wilhelmstrasse indicate that this quarter, the economy reached a critical inflection point, strained by the colossal demands of the four-year plan and rapid rearmament. On November 5th, our sources tell us of a secret meeting at the Reich Chancellery. We've seen a memorandum of the meeting by a certain Colonel Hossbach. During the conference, Hitler admitted to his high command that absolute economic autarky in food and the economy was impossible to achieve. While he expressed that he still held hope that some raw materials could be produced in sufficient volumes domestically, he now believed that many cannot and never will be. When asked if he believed that it would ever be possible to feed the population exclusively on domestic produce, he was quoted as having responded with a flat no. Thus, he pivoted from his previous statement of achieving full autarky and declared that Germany's problems could only be solved by the use of force to acquire living space, Lebensraum, in Europe. The primary targets that Hitler has chosen for such annexation are Czechoslovakia and his country of birth, Austria. His earliest timeline is mid-1938, only 6 months from now, by the latest in the mid-1940s. While his military commanders expressed fears that this would lead to war with France and Britain, Hitler seemed sure that they would not get militarily involved, perhaps even do nothing at all. The outcome of the meeting was not only a plan for international aggression, but by default also the continuation of aggressive deficit spending on rearmament. Economics Minister Hjalmar Schacht has warned again and again that this will lead to hyperinflation and ruin. By November, he had not only been sidelined from any meaningful decisions in this matter, as Göring is now in charge of the 4-year plan, but it had also become clear that his warnings had been firmly and finally dismissed. And so, Schacht formally resigned his post as Minister of Economy on November 26th, although he remains as Minister without portfolio and President of the Reichsbank. Nonetheless, his resignation marks the decisive defeat of any traditional economic caution. It is reported that the expenditure for rearmament will soon consume 35% of the national income, with tax revenues covering barely half of the 30 billion Reichsmark spent by the state. According to independent observers, the impending bankruptcy now guarantees that military expansion is an immediate economic necessity. Despite that they are now careening towards an inevitable war that the military leadership warns may reignite a new continental conflict, inside the Nazi leadership, the mood was one of supreme confidence and a near gleeful pivot towards war preparation. The diplomatic signals received during Lord Halifax's visit on November 19th seemed to confirm Hitler's theories of non-involvement from a fortnight before, leading the Nazi elite to agree with their leader that Britain lacks the resolve to prevent German expansion. Halifax's visit could be read in Berlin as a sign that Britain might tolerate orderly revision in Central Europe, especially over Austria and Czechoslovakia, so long as Germany avoided a crisis that forced British intervention. And so, bolstered by the hope that Hitler would thereby strengthen Germany's position by yet more international miracles, the promise of a transition from domestic consolidation to open aggression energized party radicals who reportedly view international diplomacy merely as a stalling tactic while the military prepares to strike. Furthermore, the leadership firmly links their territorial ambitions to their ultimate racial goals, viewing spatial conquest and ideological purification as inseparable. Following a lengthy discussion with Hitler in late November, Joseph Goebbels confidently noted the regime's uncompromising determination. The Jews must out of Germany, yes, out of all of Europe. This will take some time, but it will and must happen. The Führer is strongly determined in this. Reportedly, the military is less convinced by racial goals and that Germany can prevail in any coming conflict, leaving them fractured on the issue. Likewise, the German people's reaction to the regime's escalating radicalism was diverse and splintered. For many ordinary citizens, the propaganda campaign successfully fostered a sense of patriotic entitlement and invincibility. As he left Germany this past autumn of 1937, American correspondent William Shirer noted the chilling confidence among the regime's supporters, writing that he departed with the words of a Nazi marching song still dinning in my ears, "Today we own Germany, tomorrow the whole world." However, for minorities and regime opponents, the atmosphere was suffocating. For Jewish Germans, the opening of the Ewige Jude exhibition in Munich elicited deep distress. In Berlin, Jewish physician Herta Natoff told us of the inescapable assault on our psyche. At every corner, in 100 shop windows, the repulsive poster for the political touring exhibition, The Eternal Jew. In the newspapers, daily references to the need to visit this exhibition, the most odious race, the most odious bastard mixture. Even some non-Jewish Germans recognized the moral depravity of the state's actions. An anonymous writer in Munich expressed profound outrage in a private letter about the exhibition. Well, in Munich they have opened an exhibition entitled The Eternal Jew. The exhibition is sponsored by the German Reich. All the outlandish old wives' tales, all the mean and base practices spawned in the Dark Ages are all the Nazis' new lies. Fools, thieves, Nazi minions applauded. Decent Germans, who are still capable of thinking for themselves, feel only the deepest shame about such villainy. Yet Such voices of dissent were entirely marginalized by the machinery of propaganda and the ever-tightening police state, leaving the broader public either passively complicit or actively supportive of the regime's aggressive trajectory. For anyone who has had the fortitude and patience to get through the painfully poor literary efforts of the Führer and actually manage to read Mein Kampf, it feels like this quarter was when the components of Hitler's vision became aligned and set on a path that he foresaw during those fateful months in the Landsberg prison. In convoluted pages and contorted rhetoric, he articulates his interconnected goals of racial purity, cultural dominance, and territorial conquest across several foundational passages. He defines the overarching mission of his movement by stating that the state is only a means to an end and construes its end as the preservation of the racial existence of man. Therefore, the highest purpose of a völkisch state is concern for the preservation of those original racial elements which bestow culture and create the beauty and dignity of a higher mankind. He links the rebirth of the German race and the purification of its culture directly to the ethnic cleansing of the Jews, declaring that the nationalization of our masses will only be successful if, along with all positive fighting for the soul of our people, its international poisoners are extirpated. To Hitler, this is the defining principle of civilization, as he claims that the race question not only furnishes the key to world history, but also to human culture as a whole. Regarding the aggressive militarization required to achieve Lebensraum, Hitler writes that the National Socialist movement must find the courage to gather our people and their strength for an advance along the road that will lead these people from its present restricted living space to new land and soil. Finally, he encapsulates this vision for ultimate victory in this imagined racial war in the concluding thought of the book. A state which, in an age of racial poisoning, devotes itself to the cultivation of its best racial elements must one day become masters of the earth. It is a messianic vision of a promised land that will befall the righteous if they are willing to fight for it. It is the most terrifying of messages, as it presupposes conquest, subjugation, and death. It is an idea based on the false premise that human existence is a zero-sum game, where the only options are victory or demise. A reduction of our species into simple beasts, incapable of all the beauty that over thousands of years we have proven to be our strength. Collaboration, cooperation, conviviality, curiosity, courtesy, communality, courage, creativity, cogency, and compassion. Instead, he begs us to beckon to our weakest sides and descend into the darker aspects of our inhumanity: fear, tribalism, jealousy, callousness, irrationality, ruthlessness, hatred, belligerence, savagery, and bloodlust. Beware of anyone who claims that for you to win, others must lose, and stokes your fears by using identity to define them as beasts. For what they are actually saying is that they want you to become a beast, an animal that they can tame into a ferocious pet enslaved by their chauvinist goals. Never forget. Join the Time Ghost Army at patreon.com or timeghost.tv so that we can continue exposing the errors and successes of our ancestors to build a better future for all of us.